Greetings, everybody. I'm Larry Williams, the Director of Karma at the Consortium for the Advancement of Research Methods and Analysis at Texas Tech University in the Rawls College of Business. Let me wish you a happy 2024 as I welcome you to this special quick chat today that we're having with Heiko Breitzoll from the University of Klagenfurt. And we're going to chat with Heiko in anticipation of his upcoming webcast that he will preview for us towards the end of this chat. You may know that these webcasts are part of our webcast program that Karma runs, where universities join our consortium and have access to live webcasts like what Heiko and Andreas Schwab will be doing next week, but also to over 250 recordings from past lectures, as well as live panel sessions that we have for PhD students and also for Ask the Experts. But for now, we're going to learn a little bit more about Heiko and get him to tell us about what he's going to be talking about next week. It's extra special because Heiko and I realize that we've known each other for many years, and he's been a strong supporter of Karma over the years, including hosting short courses in what we think was 2010, as best we can recall, back at Wuppertal, Germany. He's also participated as a panelist in other live Karma events and has really been one of our strongest advocates in Europe for Karma. So it's extra special to have this chance to chat with him. So Heiko, greetings, my friend. I hope you're doing well. We're coming off the holidays. People do different things. Some people relax. Some people spend time with family. How did you enjoy your holiday break?
Hi, Larry. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for your kind words. Yeah, I've certainly been on the more relaxing end of the spectrum. So just trying to wind down from the usual busyness of being a teacher and researcher, I guess. So just hanging out with friends and family and trying to relax a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that's for many, including myself, that's the best way to do it. So you've been supportive of Karma for many years, and you also are somebody who does research and teaching in the area of research methods. Is there something that events or experiences in the past that triggered your interest, that kind of the spark that got it all going?
It's interesting because I'm really not able to pinpoint any specific event or something like that. So it must have been that I sort of just drifted into that, I suppose. And like in hindsight, what I think might have happened is that I guess I just try to understand how I can become a better researcher or do better work. And that sort of made me sort of look into the tools that we have at our disposal, and perhaps also based on the experience that the doctoral program that I attended wasn't super strong on methods. So I guess kind of like the maybe the parts of the origin of Karma, I guess, where I was basically a future participant in Karma in the sense that I felt that I lacked some of those skills that would be helpful to do really good research. And so before I found Karma, I guess, I started looking into these things myself and sort of started self-teaching. That's one component. Another component might be that I have sort of a long-lasting interest in critical thinking. And so I guess I saw that, one important part of critical thinking is to think critically about your own work and your own thought processes. And I thought that, okay, methods are just tools that help us sort of apply critical thinking to research questions in a way.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that fed into that.
yeah. Well, that's an interesting kind of evolution. Several of the people had their history or their initial spark in methods related to some problem that they encountered in their own research, and as that has evolved, they maintain a balance of interest in methods issues and substantive issues. So, could you quickly tell us about kind of the substantive areas of research that interest you the most these days? Just topic areas that you're working in?
Yeah, so the main two topics really that I'm working on and I have been working on for a few years now are what we now like to call workplace attendance behavior. So that's like a summary or a combination of presenteeism and absenteeism, right? Where absenteeism is something that's been investigated for a very long time, but then in the last, I don't know, maybe a decade or so, attention has been shifting towards presenteeism a little bit, where we look at, why do people work when they're ill, and under what circumstances, and what effects does that have on them, and how can organizations maybe manage that a little bit to help avoid some of the more negative consequences. So that's one thing, and the other thing would be workplace commitments. Another, very I don't want to say traditional, but a very well-established field of research.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I think maybe one of the last times we chatted, did you go to the Ohio State?
yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So that's been going on for quite some time, and I've been there multiple times. And in fact, we're currently in the process of starting to plan for the next edition of that.
uh-huh.
So I don't think I'm allowed to give anything away, but it'll be a little bit different this time.
All right. Well, I'm sure that those who have attended before will be committed to enjoying it, regardless of how it may change.
Precisely.
So, yeah, I think for many of us, it is kind of that interface of substance and methods that is what excites us the most. So, in the time that you've been involved, were in terms of your own research or the teaching that you do, I have found that over the years, we naturally there are certain things that we really like to talk about, teach, and present, and other things that's less true. Is there any particular type of topic? And sometimes it doesn't have to be in the area that we do research, but is there any kind of topic that you enjoy engaging with the most, whether it's teaching or conversation with colleagues?
Well, I guess so generally speaking, of the different things that I teach, and this is not the most exciting answer, but I think it is methods that I like teaching the most on a general level.
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe because of the critical thinking thing, that I think it's just interesting to see how students sort of understand there's this systematic process that we use to understand organizations, and that learning those tools and those skills really helps them become a better decision maker, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And then within that, I guess the two main things that I like talking about in different versions and at different levels of study program would be causal inference, and structural equation modeling, which I partly learned from you. So that's another nice sort of connection to the Karma universe, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So, what I know you're going to talk a little bit about that in your presentation. In general, what do you think about the way the typical SEM researcher pursues that inference process with their model, the decisions that they make at the end of the day to arrive at whether they have a good model. Are we mostly doing it good? Are we mostly doing it bad? Is there a mix of both? From
That's
your
a Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure that a lot of people have looked at that systematically, like specifically for studies using SEM. I think if I understand correctly, most studies using SEM use data that are based on non-experimental designs.
yeah.
So that inherently puts some limitations on the things we can do in terms of causal inference. At the same time, you have, the tradition where some people used to call SEM, causal modeling, which sort of already sets up a bit of disappointment, I guess, because it turns out that SEM is wonderful, but it's not magic. So, and although as we will see in my webcast, there is a connection between SEM and the thing that's going to be the topic of my webcast, where there are some really neat things that you can do with SEM that help with causal inference. But generally speaking, I think once you don't have sort of exhausted all of the options for causal inference on the design side of things, you really have to be very careful with your statistical inferences because they might just not tell you what you want to know. Right? Just because you have a certain set of covariances, that doesn't mean that those are causal effects.
Yeah.
And that's true for SEM as well as for any other statistical model. So I don't think there's anything specific about structured equation modeling where people do a better or worse job of causal inference.
Yeah.
I think SEM has other advantages.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm old enough that I have some of my earlier publications that have causal modeling in the title. And there are several downsides of the use of that particular terminology. One being that it sort of sets up the first comment or the first criticism that people would make, which would be, oh, well, you can't prove causality. When in fact, from my point of view, a lot of it was about trying to move closer to having information that will either show that your model is consistent or inconsistent with the data, and just how to get the best parameter estimates that aren't contaminated by both random and systematic measurement error.
Right.
But I don't think, my interest has been more narrowly around goodness of fit measures. And we've done some comprehensive reviews of management researchers' use of those indices. I had a paper that started out in grad school that we dropped along the way, which was basically how is it that the researcher gets to the final model? That process of how they think about the analyses and the models that they want to compare and the information that I think is relatively speaking an unexplored area. So, well, we're talking about time, and I guess at the end of the day, we hope that as we gain experience in our profession, in any profession, including ours, we like to think that we end up becoming better. And so, or as we do things different, we hope that most of those things are different, that are different are better. So if you were to reflect back on how you have progressed in the time that you've been a researcher, do you think that you've changed in any kind of systematic ways, approaching situations differently, whether it's as a writer, as a data analyst, or as a reviewer? How do you think you've grown?
I think, because you started your question with saying that, we like to be, well, our goal is to come better by progressing. And that's probably a good general description. But I think at the same time, the process can often be a little bit frustrating because as we do gain a little bit more insight, we also realize how little we really understand and that there's so much out there that's still, not, investigated very well, or there are many open questions, and that things are much more complicated than we used to think. And so I guess one thing that has changed for me is to understand a little bit better that uh, doing good research is extremely complicated and no one does it perfectly. Nobody has all the answers. All you can do is try to be, critical of your own work and careful and, meticulous. Um, and that's that's what you should sort of expect of yourselves, but you shouldn't go beyond that and expecting that you do everything perfect all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and but at the same time, that also means that whenever someone is trying to tell you that there is the answer or there is the solution to a problem, or you think that that's true, that's probably a mistake. Right. And so whenever someone is trying to present something as the solution to a problem, they might be missing something, or they might be trying to sell you something. And that's something that I've become more aware of, that, things are always complicated and it's always a good idea to try to take a step back and look at it very carefully and then maybe try to find a solution.
Yeah. I think with a lot of people too, when they start out and they get out of graduate school, they're very idealistic about how the research process and the review and publication process is supposed to occur. And that one of the things that happens with experience engaging in that process is we come to see, uh, first of all, how rapidly it all changes, and that it's hard to build correction into the system, because at the end of the day, it depends upon people being willing to give of their time as reviewers and editors, and so it's a complicated social system. So we can hope that through things like open science and reviewer training and paper development workshops. Those to me are kind of examples of things where we're changing the system in ways in ways that we hope will be good. So all of
Yeah.
that's kind of culminating in your current interest in the topic of your webcast, that live webcast next Friday, January 26th, I think it is. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about then?
Yeah, so this is a topic that's sort of become a favorite of mine, I guess, over the last, well, maybe 2 or 3 years. So I'm going to give an introduction to what people call directed acyclical graphs, or DAGs, which is a very fancy sounding name for something that I guess on the technical level is a bit fancy, but it's also a relatively straightforward tool for basically identifying the conditions under which we can make good causal inferences. So it's kind of it's a tool that lets you understand what are the different relationships between variables that are probably at play in the phenomenon that I'm investigating. And given that, what do I need to do in order to be relatively certain about the causal effects that I want to investigate.
Yeah.
And this is all, well, not all, but the sort of the reduced and most intuitive version of it is graphically based. So you can draw it with, you know, a pen and a piece of paper, which I find incredibly useful, right? It's if you're not a mathematician, which I'm not, that means that you can do something that helps you think on a piece of paper that does not involve equations, which is always good for me, at least. And so that's really helpful. And it's a tool that has been increasing in use massively across the social sciences in the last couple of years. And I think it's incredibly useful, and I think it's good for students to understand that it's out there. I've been teaching it to master's students and doctoral students, and some of them have told me that it has really helped change the way they think about causal inference. So I'm hoping that something similar will happen with the audience, at least some of the members of the audience.
Well, we are, you know, part of what we are trying to do with Karma is, of course, our main audience is management and organizational researchers, but we acknowledge that a lot of methodological advancements occur outside of our own area, and it's a very important role that we have to introduce organizational researchers to kind of those topics and tools that they may not yet see in the management literature, and we're trying to get them in there. So it's going to be great to have your lecture to help play that role for us. Again, that webcast lecture is next Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. So if you're in the Eastern Hemisphere, you can enjoy it late afternoon, and we hope that you will enjoy it. The topic area is related to structural equation models, and if you're interested in that, you may also be interested in knowing that we have, you know, probably 20 webcast lectures from great people over the years on different aspects of structural equation models. And you can also keep your eyes open for short course information. Karma does a variety of online, and we're moving back into in-person courses, and SEM is an important area for that. So hopefully all of that will be of interest to you. Heiko, it was great catching up with you. Look forward to seeing you this Friday. I appreciate you fitting the time in the chat this morning, as well as to make the commitment to do the webcast lecture. Great catching up with you, Heiko. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. My pleasure.